Yo, what is up guys? Shindig here. Now, this is going to be a slightly different video. I had a viewer reach out that requested me to go through and voice over and provide feedback on one of their Mythic Plus runs. We see their talents here, fairly standard Mythic Plus build. And after some back and forth, I decided to publish it to my channel because I think if you watch a lot of my recently posted content, apart from my guide, you'll see me playing, Rogue at a fairly high level, either killing mythic raid bosses or doing high level keys, which as somebody newer to playing Rogue might not be super relatable. So in this case, Emma's Slav the Rogue here is fairly new to playing Rogue and playing Subtlety in particular. And so we're going to kind of go through and see if we can give some feedback. I'm actually going to back up a little bit here. Before we even put the key in, we could press symbols, and that would carry 2 supercharged comp points into the first pool here. So make a mental note, and every time you enter a key, just hit symbols, and then you'll be good to go. Then heading to the first pool, going to Shadow Strike into Flag. Ideally what would follow is a Rupture, or 2. Into our symbols, I assume Dance and Sectech comes here, yeah. So into our symbols, Dance, Backstab, Sectech. So we're pressing all the right buttons, but the order isn't quite correct. I definitely check out the guide in that case if you're unsure or don't remember what the order should be. Once we're in our Shadow Dance, we're pressing Shuriken Storm and Black Powder. Black Powder is correct. This pool has 10 mobs here. You can see this little Rupture icon. This shows the number of targets within this person's direct vicinity. It's a weak aura. It's pretty nice. So Black Powder is good here. Shuriken Storm, however, is not the correct build. We want to use Shadow Strike in this case. Shadow Strike gets a bunch of inherent benefits from your Trickster talent tree, in addition to extending the duration on your symbols through your talent Inevitability. Anyways, we go into another Dance and Symbols. Shadow Strike this time. That is good. We also apply Rupture in our Dance. Ideally, we want to do it outside of our Dance. Once you press Dance, use that time to Sectech and Eviz. Instantly followed up by another Dance. Our Cold Blood's back, so we press it with Sectech. We're back to Shuriken Storming again. So yeah, ideally it's Shadow Strike here. Pull the Peacekeeper in. This has been kind of one really long chain pull. Into another Dance and Symbols. Okay, I don't love this final Dance and Symbols. We're disoriented here. Good cheat death proc. Because notice that our Blades and Flag come up, and we now don't have Dance and any Symbols charges to pair with them. And we also just press them off cooldown. Okay, so this is a fairly common mistake that I think newer sub-rogue players will make. It's to press their abilities on cooldown all the time, which it seems that we are doing here. Problem is that while you have a lot of cooldown buttons you can press, you need to pair some of them together to gain value from those abilities. So Flagellation and Shadow Blades, for example, are cooldowns that require at least 1 Dance, 1 Symbols, and a Sectech charge. And we really prefer to have 2. So, I mean, saying at least 1 is being generous. You want to have 2 charges of Symbols and 2 charges of Dance for each Flagellation and each Shadow Blades press. So something you should think about, and generally a shorthand rule of thumb, is if you're 30 seconds out from your Blades and Flag being up, so see how they're 20 seconds out right now, I would be sitting on my Symbols, sitting on my Dance, which will mean that, oh damn, I feel like I'm not doing very much damage. That's just part of playing Subtlety. You have very, very low damage outside of your cooldowns. But that's a trade-off you have to make to have such strong burst. Right, a lot of your damage is, most of your damage is baked into your cooldowns. So we go into this pool, we use Shadow Blades. We're not pressing flag. Okay, so this is also not great. We press flag very late into the pool. Okay, two things here. One, Flagellation and Shadow Blades we should treat as one cooldown. Now, we don't want to press them literally at the exact same time. Ideally, you flag, as I kind of briefly touched on before. We would like Rupture. Actually, I'm not sure if I touched on this specifically. There isn't the order for going to your cooldowns. I mean, I mentioned my guide, but very quickly, you would like go into a pool. You can apply Ruptures either before pressing flag or after. Flag, let's say you flag, Rupture 2 different mobs. Or you have 4 Ruptures out in the pool. You would then go Dance, Symbols, Backstab, Shadow Blades, plus an unused trinket like you have House of Cards. If you're using Transmitter in the case that Emma's Fought Slab is here, you would probably use that a little bit like around when you press flag, just so you have time to complete the task. And ideally you complete it at the exact same time you're pressing Blades into your first Sec Tech. And from there you're just kind of slamming finishers inside your dance, following back a second secret technique that you can use within that 15-second window provided to you from your Blades and your trinket. But because we're kind of pressing things on cooldown, we just send Shadow Blades alone here with Pot into a Dance, Symbols, Cold Blood secret tech. We don't have Flagellation to pair with it. So again, it's kind of you have a lot of cooldown buttons. It's tempting to press them, but as much as possible, we need to exercise restraint and hold them for when we can pair them up and do the most possible damage. Now, this first boss is actually a very good sub-boss because it has a damage amp, which occurs when you like kick those little bombs into the boss. You'll notice that we had sent cooldowns before this damage amp was up. Ideally, we need to hold for when that damage amp occurs, and then send your damage into it, right? Because you're such a bursty specialization, you need to utilize moments where there are damage amps, or if it's you're doing trash in a dungeon, moments when there are like you're doing big pulls, going into new pulls, that kind of thing. In the sense that, okay, we don't want to just press Shadow Blades and Flagellation on a pack that have like 2 mobs that have 20% health left, right? Now, a big part of that does come from being how familiar you are with the dungeon pool, which will come in time. So I wouldn't stress too much about it, but it is something to think about going forward. So here we sent cooldowns again, but we kind of sent them... We have some overlap with the damage amp, but we sent them a bit too early. We still flag up, but we actually get a big Shadow Dance Sec Tech off, but we don't have Shadow Blades to pair with it. One thing I will say that I've noticed that our rogue here is doing correctly is that they're pressing Sec Tech as their first finisher after going into Dance. That is optimal. We want to basically put Secret Technique on cooldown as soon as possible for CDR. Right, we supercharge our next 2 finishers. After we press Symbols, usually going to press Symbols when you press Dance. You follow that with a Secret Technique. You get big finisher value that then farms back your cooldown on Sec Tech. Furthermore, your Secret Technique also guarantees your next 2 builders apply Unseen Blade. And we're farming to a new coup de grace more quickly. So those are the kind of the benefits, and usually why you're pressing Sec Tech early into your dance window. So again, we're kind of just pressing abilities on cooldown here. Our Shadow Blades was up. We had to dance and Sec Tech charge. I'm not going to be a dead horse at this point, but it seems like we're going to do this throughout the rest of the key. Again, and I guess the last time I'll say it, until I say it again maybe. Really want to hold 2 dance and 2 symbols charges for our cooldown window, where we're using flagellation and blades, okay? We don't want to separate them. We don't want to go into those cooldowns without 2 of those charges available. Now in this section, let's talk about a little bit about some of the dungeon mobs here. The Azurite extractors are the highest health mobs in this pool, so ideally we are hitting off of them. And this is kind of a general practice for Mythic Plus. If you're somebody that's newer to Mythic Plus, it is best to hit off the mob that has the highest amount of health. Most DPS specializations in the game have some amount of prio damage, which just implies that they're going to do slightly more damage to the target they're hitting, based on abilities that are baked into their rotation, their talent tree, so on and so forth. So, because these mobs have the highest amount of health, they're often the last to die, hence why we want to hit off them. So you can see in this case here, right, everything else is dead except for the Azurite Extractor. So the goal is to hit off this mob then. It's good for the speed of the dungeon, good practice in general. However, in these pools, there are also casters. So, as a rogue, you have a pretty short kick, and that's a very helpful piece of utility. You should be utilizing that kick to stop casts in these pools. So, it can be a little awkward in these big AoE pools to have to like click through and kick a target. So usually what I'd recommend is like have a focus macro and then a focus kick macro. So you can hit off the highest health mob in the pool, set one of the casters to your focus, and then just kick it off cooldown. I see in this case here we have kick is bound to 2. An easy suggestion for making a focus kick macro would just be to use shift 2, right? It's a shift modifier, I think, is the easiest modifier to kind of get in the habit of using when it comes to pressing abilities using keybinds. I know people that also have like a control modifier and an alt modifier. I really only ever learned to use the shift modifier. So my kick is on R, for example, and I have a focus kick on shift R. You will need one more additional bind to set your focus, but if you can slot that into anywhere that's handy, it becomes a massive aid in Mythic Plus, right? You then become a lot more helpful to your team as you're able to more efficiently control the pack you're doing, right? Using your kick on cooldown. Okay, I do want to point out here something that's great. We have dance, we have a symbols charge, we have all of our cooldowns going into the second boss. So at some point we were able to resync our abilities. That is great. So hopefully we're pressing everything as we go into the boss here. Yeah, and we're pressing all of our buttons, not exactly in the right order. I want to pause real quick. You're going to notice we press flagellation on the Earth Rager. This is bad. The reason this is bad is that flagellation is like a set of 2 different buffs when like we press this ability. We essentially we're buffed for like 24 seconds, but it's 2 sets of 12 seconds. The first set of 12 seconds, you see this dot on the mob? As long as this dot persists, we can gain flagellation stacks. So in this case, we've already fully ramped our flagellation to 30 stacks, so that part is done. However, if the mob you applied flagellation to dies before this duration finishes, we lose out on the remaining 7 seconds of like the first half of our flag window. So what's going to happen is that this mob's going to die, and you're going to see this ability reset to 12. That means we're there it is. We've reset to this, or we've skipped to the second half of our flag window. And it's 12 seconds into 12. So, key thing to remember here, if we are ever pressing flagellation, make sure you press it on like the highest health mob in the pool, or in this case, the boss, and you can then hit off whatever you want. You don't need to be hitting off the mob you apply your flag to in order to ramp it. So you just need to make sure that the mob you apply to doesn't die. Thing 2. We're also, on this fight, actually I won't pause it. There's no need to hit the non-empowered ad at any point ever. This boss will always spawn, or will always have 2 ads up, okay? So he's going to empower 1. There's going to be another one running around chasing you ranged. If you try to kill both the ads, he'll spawn 2. If you only kill 1, he'll spawn 1. Hence, it doesn't really matter if you kill 2. He's going to spawn more ads. So only worry about hitting the empowered ad. Additionally, we want to hit off the empowered ad here because we get a damage amp. So you get big value from attacking the empowered ad. Otherwise, just use the time to hit the boss and whittle his health down. So here we're hitting off the empowered ad. This is good. And again, we press flag on a mob that's already dead, and this time, our flag is up for such a brief period, we actually don't hit 30 stacks. And then it immediately goes to the second half of our flag window, so we're not getting full value out of that ability. And again, we're hitting the non-important ad here. Another thing you do as a rogue here on this fight is you can actually throw crippling poison on. Your ranged players will love you for this. They're just getting hunted down the entire time. If there's no other slowing DPS class or in your group that can help control these ads a little bit better. Oh, also one thing I didn't talk about. If you have an idea like, oh, I'm just gonna hit the ads and get them low for when he does the empowered ad so we can kill it insta. The empowerment heals the ad to full, so you're better off just hitting the boss. We do get a nice Shadow Dance Symbols Cold Blood Secret Tech off, so that is good. I did touch on this earlier about how pressing Sec Tech first was the best thing you can do. In your dance, that is generally true, or true most of the time. Another reason it's true though that I didn't touch on is that because when pressing symbols, you gain Supercharger. We want to press Secret Tech within 2 finishers of that symbols, because Secret Technique is our hardest hitting ability. So you want to make sure it's buffed by Supercharger, which treats that finisher as +2 combo points. Then we're taking Force Induction in the talent tree, which is an additional +1. So if we send, a 7 combo point Secret Technique with Supercharger active, that's effectively a 10 combo point Sec Tech. Big value, big value. Anyways, we kill the boss, we're into the cart. Down the ramp we go. We're starting these pulls in stealth, that is good. You do want to try and get a re-stealth as often as you can. The benefit is pretty small, but you get pre-med here, you see in the middle of the screen. Pre-med just makes it so that your next builder generates full combo points. Usually you're going to go open with a Shadow Strike into a finisher. And because we are kind of always want to open with a Shadow Strike, and we're going to guarantee get full combo points with that Shadow Strike, one thing you can actually do between pulls, if you're sitting on like some random amount of combo points, is you just press like a random finisher, right? You can use Slice and Dice, you can press Black Powder, and that will give you a little bit of CDR on your dance, on your Sec Tech, for when you go into the next pull. A little piece of tech there. Yeah, but unfortunately, after that second boss, we're kind of back in the swing of desyncing our blades and flagellation now. These whirlwinds also from the masterminds are super annoying. Luckily, because we're melee, the silence doesn't do anything. You can solo use abilities, but it does do damage, so preferably try not to stand in them. We're pressing Shiv. These guys have a buff? I'm just gonna go back a little bit. No, okay. Shiv for sub rogue doesn't do anything. I have to imagine this was like a fat finger. The only time you would ever Shiv is Subtlety is if you were trying to use it for its tranquilizing effect or soothing effect, however way you want to put it. If a mob has an enrage, you can Shiv off the enrage. A good example of that actually is the pull before the second boss. That mini boss there will apply an enrage to himself. One thing you could do, or that's good to look for, again, a way you can kind of contribute and provide some utility, is when that mob gets to 2 stacks of their enraged buff. I think it's like a haste buff they apply to himself. You can Shiv it off. Also, you might be there's a party chat as a mix of English and I believe it was Swedish, I was told. If you're like me and not fully able to understand all party chat. While we deal with the rest of this pack, I will point out our buffs here. So we're playing top right of the screen, we're playing Instant Poison and Trophic. That's kind of the standard, I would say. I do believe a Trophic Poison is the better of the two between that and Mind Numbing. However, at lower key levels and when you're pugging, I think Mind Numbing, it gives a lot more value. Slowing the cast time when you're not able to communicate and coordinate, who's kicking what, who's stopping what. I think that extra time can give you a little loot check there on the dungeon. I respect it. That extra time that it gives you to solve, whatever mechanics you're facing can prove quite valuable. In my case, I'm playing a Trophic In my case, I'm playing a Trophic Poison, but that's because I'm playing with like a coordinated group where we can communicate who's kicking what. So for us, it's less of an issue, right? We're also playing Verse Flask. That is good. I believe, I'm actually not sure what the highest DPSing Flask is at the moment for Mythic Plus. It might be Mastery. It's interesting because I know in Raid, it's Alchemical Chaos, but that's the one that gives you a random secondary stat every 30 seconds. But it's kind of dependent on you getting lucky and getting a good secondary stat proc inside your cooldowns. So it's kind of RNG dependent. And relatively speaking, this is in single target. And relatively, the Verse and Mastery Flask are like pretty close behind. So if you're looking for something more consistent, you could play either one of those two. In keys, I think you prefer the consistency. Your secondary stats like Verse, like Mastery, get a lot more value in AoE, so you're more incentivized to play it. And in this case, playing Verse here, I think, is totally fine, because not only to give you damage, it also gives you DR. We love being tanky. And now in this fight, I don't believe Feint works on the Propellant Blast. So if you're playing Chi Death like Emma says here, you don't really have much in your kit to use to help live through that thing. Apart from Crimson Vial. So that's sort of the one ability you could press to kind of help out, but otherwise you would have to play Elusiveness. But at this key level, I don't think it's necessary. Chi Death is the move here. Finishing off the buffs, we have, I believe, Whetstones applied to our weapons. That is correct. and food buff. Not sure if this is the primary stat buff or high secondary stat buff. Either are fine. Yeah, this boss is pretty chill. Not much to talk about here. I respect staying in the poop to kill the boss. Alright, these peacekeepers or these war machines here can be kind of annoying to deal with all the mines that come around. Well, it's less the warkeepers that are annoying to deal with, and more so the mines that they spawn and or are around that come into the pool. The mines, if they reach you and explode, they don't count towards the dungeon. And they only give you 1 count, so it's not a lot, but often most routes will place some amount of mines, so you see that one exploded. That doesn't count towards our dungeon counter. Now, if a mine that the war machine spawns is fixated on you, you can safely run into that one with cloak, and if you just want to like get rid of it from chasing you, that is fine, because those ones don't count towards your dungeon count. Only the ones that you spawn along the way that aren't attached to the war machine could count. So something to consider there. This is also another situation in the dungeon where crippling poison is actually very, very helpful. You can press Shuriken Storm to apply it, and then just run around the war machine. Try to kite them through the war machine so that they get cleaved down, as all your DPS will be focusing off the war machine. You can also use things like here, like kidney and the like. Unlike the last boss, these AoEs I believe are feintable. So pressing feint as a defensive is insanely powerful on things it works on, because it only reduces AoE type damage. But a lot of effects in Mythic Plus are considered AoE, so feint can get a lot of value. Pressing it as subtlety though can be a little annoying, because you only have 100 energy total. And outside of your cooldowns, your energy regen is very, very slow. So it does feel painful to press, but it's super strong. It is worth pressing. Unless you got a gangster healer that can keep you alive, but I would not suggest testing their healing potential for you to degree damage in a pug situation. Worst case scenario is you dying with not pressing it, versus worst case scenario you press it and they can actually heal you fine. You just lose 25 energy, right? One outcome is a little bit better than the other. Also looks like we're going to be a little bit short in count here. Also, in this case, it looks like we don't press feint on this double. That is pretty scary, but healer's cranking. Shout out to them. So you will probably have to kill a couple more war machines after this boss, or one war machine and a bunch of mines. Well, they have time. Now this boss is like a lot of the fights in here is kind of just you hit and there's not too much going on. The one mechanic that you can take advantage of as a rogue here is the homing missile. So that was the mechanic that went out on, I believe it was the shaman. Oh no, it was the bounce druid over there. It fixates you, puts a big circle around you, and once it reaches, it will explode and apply a dot to you and anyone within that circle. if you press Vanish while the boss is casting this ability on you, so if you were to if this homing missile was on Emma's Fought Slab and they vanished, it will not cast, and it will not recast on somebody else, which is often true for a lot of different effects like this in the Mythic Plus dungeon pool. So in this case, rather than pressing our Vanish as a Root Break or as a very small DPS cooldown, right? Because you get pre-med and can Shadow Strike, that was very suspect boss positioning there. Big value of Archie Deatho. I would say, so Vanish here? Fortunately, we don't. All good. I would use Vanish for this mechanic. It just prevents it from going out. That's less damage that occurs over the course of the fight. More uptime. Very good. Into the intermission, these Sky Rocketers, is that what they're called? Sky Roacher? Scorcher. Sky Scorchers are very dangerous. And this is, unfortunately, this mechanic is another instance of where feint and evasion don't work for them. However, it is a good idea to feint the overlaps with Drill Smash, since that does group damage. If you get that, timed with a double shot on you, you might just go from 100 to 0. And feint, at the very least, will reduce the damage from Drill Smash, so that could be good value. Are we going to get there in time? Not quite. Try to save a Shadow Step and or Sprint Charge for if you get that Drill Smash on you, so you can try to get to the pillar. Sometimes they can be spread really, really awkwardly. And the longer you spend the phase, the longer this boss is. So the only other mechanic on this fight that I haven't discussed are the circles you see on the floor right there. Really good Shadow Step, by the way. Those will spawn from 2 of the Mimron head-looking flying NPCs around the room. And they'll cover most of the area, but you can kind of think of this room as being split into a grid of 9 smaller squares, so a 3x3 grid. And those heads will occupy one line along one axis and one line along another axis. And so that will create different, they'll kind of send rockets down along that line. And it kind of bleeds into other nearby quadrants where those rockets land. But their movement around the room will create safe spots, which if your tank recognizes this, they'll move around to avoid, right? So there's a safe spot close to the entrance here, and your tank was able to bring the boss over there. There are also safe spots that will just literally never get a rocket put down. You see that grate on the ground next to the boss. I think a position on that grate is one of the safe spots. Same with the grate adjacent on the other side. And you can pretty reliably stand there in phase 1. In phase 2, however, it's a bit more difficult because the overlaps with the Gatling gun, where the boss spins around shooting in front of him, and the rockets that go in the ground make it so that you can't really just stay in one spot. But we're getting some count here. Looks like we have time, 1:30. We are going to double pull these. Okay, so this can be pretty scary. See how it goes. Another thing too I'm going to comment on. So we're pressing Shadow Dance into Shadow Strikes. Ideally, we backstep our first finisher in our dance. We do want to utilize our premeditation. So that's the guaranteed comp points we get from entering either Stealth or Shadow Dance. On our next builder, we will generate full comp points, that's what premed does. We want to consume that on our backstab, because our backstab only awards 1 comp point, right? And Shadow Strike would otherwise award 3. So we want to use that, compare that with our backstab to then help us generate more Dance of Macabre stacks in our Shadow Dance. That is one other change here. But that should wrap out the key. 25 seconds left, and they did it. Nicely done. So, yeah, to recap, I think the big TLDR here is as you proceed throughout the key, Sub Rogue is a spec of like damage highs and damage lows. And if you are always trying to press all of your abilities on cooldown all the time, you will just be a spec of kind of lows for the entirety of the key, okay? Meaning it's like we don't have any meaningful damage event in that case. So you're better off just holding charges of dance, holding charges of symbols for your flagellation and blades, so you can have these peaks. And then when you're outside of those peaks, it is totally fine to sit on your hands and not press abilities while you wait for your blades and flag to come back up. Then secondly, make sure we're pressing our shadow blades and flagellation together, right? We get big value from using those cooldowns with each other, right? Blades gives us full comp point generation, increases our shadow damage by 20%, and flagellation increases damage our finishers by however many stacks we're able to ramp up. So using those together gives us the most value from using those abilities. So those are, I think, the two big takeaways here. But again, I don't want to fault MS Slab for their play. They're learning the spec. This is a very normal thing for newer players to do, pressing their abilities on cooldown, which I think it is a general practice across DPS specs, is like a good thing to do, right? The more cooldown presses you get over the course of the key, generally speaking, the more damage you do. Sub Rogue was just in a bit of a unique spot where some abilities you want to press on cooldown, like your blades, like your flagellation, assuming you're pressing them together. But other abilities, your smaller cooldowns, right? Your mini cooldowns, your shadow dance, your symbols, you don't always want to press on cooldown because those abilities help you do damage inside your actual cooldowns. So, but that's going to be it. Hope you guys enjoyed. Maybe you found something in here that was helpful. But that'll be it. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.